On this episode of the After the Timeout podcast, we welcome Tim Trendel, head boys basketball coach at Providence Catholic High School. We have a great conversation with Coach Trendel about self-reflection as a coach, taking over your program for a second time, and much, much more. As always, thank you for listening to the After the Timeout podcast. Let's start with our opening tip. So, Coach, you and your brother, Ken, AD at Trinity, also former Benedictine guy. I know him from days at Benedictine. You both went into athletics in Catholic schools. Kind of why do you think you both followed that path? And then, what are the benefits to you both being in the same professions, doing the same kind of thing and be able to exchange ideas?
I think a lot of that kind of goes back to just the way we were brought up. We attended Catholic schools, from starting with, kindergarten, first grade, and then really all through our college years. I finished my master's at Dominican, did my undergrad at Dominican. Ken was much the same way, between St. Vincent, St. Pat's, and Benedictine. So I think it's our upbringing, in terms of just, the schooling itself, the way our parents kind of brought us up, in the Catholic schools and kind of their importance, how Catholic schools are important to them. So it's kind of just always been kind of in our blood, has kind of been that, I think, that's really all, sometimes, it's all we know too. There's been a couple times, where maybe you thought about a public school or something like that, but it's kind of scary then, you look at it because I don't know public school education, you only hear some of the stories and stuff like that. So it's kind of, makes it kind of, like I said, a little bit of scared to kind of like think about a public school because Catholic school education is all I know. Although you talk to some people, it's not that different, but and like I said, it just gives us the opportunity, I think, too, to kind of express our faith too. I'm a man of faith and things like that. So it kind of gives you that opportunity to bring faith into the basketball program, which is you don't have that kind of luxury in a public school. So I said we can do some things there. And in terms of kind of, just kind of being in the same profession, it does kind of, allows guys to bounce ideas off each other. Kind of the situation will come up at his school and he'll call me and, hey, how would you guys handle this? Or what do you think I should do? I'm thinking about doing this. And if I can't help him much, I can turn him on to, kind of one of my friends who kind of are also kind of in similar situations and things like that. And vice versa, and if, I got a parent who kind of, being an issue, Ken, what would you do as the AD? Kind of how would you handle that? Or you got a player who kind of, maybe gets himself in some kind of trouble or something like that. You're able to kind of share those ideas with one another and kind of just be good sounding boards for each other.
Yeah, and I think that's important, right? I mean, I think Todd and I, do that for each other. I think that's something, a benefit of the profession is that we all can kind of run ideas off of each other for sure.
I think it's a great thing about the coaching fraternity, athletics fraternity is just kind of, that's kind of one of the things I do what I do and I love what I do. It's the people you build, as coaches, as, educators, you got to teach your content. Yeah. You got to coach your sport, but it's about the relationships you build, whether it be with your players, whether it be with your coworkers, your staff, things along those lines. And, it's always important. I said, the coaching profession, like I said, public school, private, no matter what, you got those relationships, you got those mentors, you got those things that you can kind of just share those ideas with. And that's been a huge, thing for me, like I said, being able to have people, whether it be my brother, whether it be guys I've coached with before, whether whatnot, just kind of just bounce those ideas off. And I said, that's the great thing. One of the great things, there's many great things about coaching, as you guys well know, but one of the great things is that fraternity of people that you have to share ideas with, to get the support with.
So let's kind of dig into your career. So you were a sophomore coach for well over a decade, and Todd and I were both sophomore / JV head coaches. So let's just kind of start with that experience. What were some lessons that you learned during that time that you feel helped you prepare to be a head coach?
Oh, I think that was a great time in my career. As I go back and think on things and reflect and whatnot. Like I said, one of the unique opportunities I had. I don't think there's too many out there. Programs that kind of run things the same way. I don't know if it's possible to run it the same way, but back when I was at St. Pat's coaching with Coach Bailey, our sophomore head coach was also a varsity assistant, and it wasn't an optional varsity assistant. It wasn't a varsity assistant in name. It was, you were, okay, he had his varsity assistant, and then he had his sophomore head coach was kind of one, it was a main man, right-hand man. So there were days when I go 3 to 5 sophomore practice, and then maybe get a 10-minute break if I was lucky, to kind of collect my thoughts after practice. And then I'd be back out on the practice floor by 5:15 and out there till 7:30 with the varsity. And then, we'd be back, practice is done with the varsity. We'd have kind of whether it be a staff meeting, whether it be a film session, kind of going over some tape breakdown, or going out and seeing grade school games. So, I mean, it was intense. Like I said, I don't know, how many, if it's still possible today with all the people's got going in their lives and things like that. I try to do that a little bit, but there's just so much going on. I don't know. I said the hours that you put in with that, but it was just a great, those years was a great learning experience. Like I said, you kind of, coach always said this, I kind of always felt this. I think our varsity team at St. Pat's is kind of run like a college team. And then we felt like our sophomore team was run like your varsity high school team would be kind of. So I kind of, got a lot of great firsthand experience there. Whether you get to plan your practices with kind of coach overseeing, one of the best around overseeing it, you get to coach your games. And then, like I said, you get to run into varsity practice and spend, and not just stand there. Like I said, that's the other thing, about working with Coach Bailey was, your assistants don't just stand there. He's not a big believer in that. He's not, he wants guys coaching. He wants suggestions. He wants feedback, so you're coaching then, so basically I was coaching for 4 hours a day after school, which was a neat thing. Is, and one time it's, you're running the practice, but then the other time you're kind of just kind of the secondary voice at practice. So that was kind of, I said, just all that, I said the game prep, the practice plan, and the in-game coaching. And then, like I said, and then, I mean, again, I've had the luxury, where, you're coaching the sophomore game, the St. Pat's Notre Dame sophomore game, and it's like a varsity atmosphere. I mean, that's if you weren't in, but to the sophomore game by halftime, I mean, you didn't get in. And so that's, that kind of crowd kind of got you ready. I mean, I remember the last time we played Holy Cross, and I was the sophomore coach. I mean, before the game, there was people hanging off the balcony at St. Pat's. So it was, I mean, just as a sophomore coach, and at that time I'm in my late 20s probably. I mean, how neat of an experience is that to be able to kind of, coach in that environment? That's an environment I didn't have again until a regional championship, probably 2 years later as a varsity head coach. But I was kind of felt ready for that because of those environments, those situations, and things like that. So it's just kind of all that kind of put in. I said, you're right there, with Coach. I said, Coach does it great. I mean, the proof's in the pudding with the guys he's kind of put out there, and the quality coaches that have kind of gone through his program. I mean, you're side by side with him. I mean, he's the man, obviously, but you're right there with him going through those things. And so everything working with Coach Bailey, and that's kind of, as a sophomore coach for 10 years, but I said, really kind of I'd like to think one of his right-hand men for those 10 years. I said, I mean, he gives you so, it's not one of those coaches where he's not one of those guys where assistants are supposed to be seen and not heard. I think that was kind of the old school way, maybe back 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It was, assistants get involved, and he puts you in every step of running a program, whether it be helping kind of find players, whether it be planning practices, game plans, scouting, all that stuff, kind of coach gives you that freedom, again, under his direction. But so that you can't, those 10 years were invaluable for me.
And then just an interesting follow-up. What was maybe the biggest change for you that when you slid over that seat, you slid over that head coach seat? What was maybe that biggest change?
Oh, it's easy to sit there when you're in the assistant's chair and throw out suggestions, but then you actually got to land on a suggestion as the head coach.
Yep.
You could sit there and suggest, hey, coach, why don't we go triangle 2 this game? Or coach, why don't we kind of, this guy can't shoot. Maybe we don't guard him on the perimeter, that. And it's easy to throw those things out there. But then when you actually got to kind of pull the trigger on, oh, we're not going to guard this guy, but he makes 4 threes today. Then it's kind of on you, I think, as kind of the assistant coach. I think that is one of probably the biggest. I said, I could throw out a million suggestions to coach. Maybe we do this, maybe we do that. And I said, it's all great, sounds great, but you actually got to pull it. And obviously, I think this day and age, it's dealing with I would deal with parents as a soft, but you always know your coach was behind you. The ultimate kind of the parents kind of issue in today's sports is kind of probably the biggest thing, sliding over a chair and kind of having to kind of deal with those types of issues.
So you talked about, some of the benefits of the Catholic school system in general, but we want to talk about it from the head coaching side. what do you, when you're in the Catholic school system and you're a head coach, what are some of the benefits of that? And then maybe what are some of the biggest challenges, right? Because you talked about it's very different than a public school. You have work enrollment and all these other things you're trying to work on outside of basketball. So kind of the benefits and the challenges.
Sure. Now I can only go off of, like I said, what I've known and what I've heard on the public school side, like some friends that I've got. So this kind of is this all, but like, I think one of the biggest things for me that I've heard of is kind of like you don't have a lot of the red tape in the Catholic school system. I said, I mean, you don't have to answer to a superintendent, a president of the school board, all those. You don't got to kind of run, and you don't. There's not a Johnny's not playing for the president of the school board, the super, those type. You have in a Catholic school, you have your president of the school kind of stays out of things for the most part. Your principal and your AD is kind of really all you're kind of looked. I mean, and then obviously your other stakeholders, your alumni and which is. But I said I think that's one of the biggest things is kind of not having to run through that. The superintendent, and your superintendent works in a whole other building. If I did have a problem, where I needed to kind of find my president. The president's in the same building, but I said the presidents very rarely get involved in that kind of stuff. I said the principal's in the same building and my AD. I said so it's kind of I think a lot of that red tape is kind of cut down on. I think the other big thing to kind of associate with that, it seems like again from just my experience not knowing the public school kind of is like the Catholic school administrators I've worked for always got your back. I mean, you'd have to screw up big time, I would think, for them to kind of. But even if you do screw, they're gonna have your back, but then they're gonna tell you screwed up behind closed doors a little bit. So I said, I know there's been countless times, where maybe a parent went to the AD, and complained about something, and I never even got to my desk just because they've kind of were able to kind of deal with it and say no, I've kind of observed the program firsthand. I'm there, I watched, I know what's going on. You're talking about a playing time issue. This thing's dead. We're behind coach. So those kind, I think that's kind of the biggest thing to me. Another things I said a big difference. I hit on it earlier. I mean, you can bring. I said I do believe in the Catholic faith. You can bring. The religion into your program. We use the chapel. Before games. You pray before practice. And I think it's important this day and age for young men to see a male quote unquote role model in their lives kind of practicing their faith kind of and living their faith out loud on a daily basis. So I think that's a big thing too that you obviously can't do in a public school. I think a little bit too, and not that maybe in private schools, I said obviously you get to again. This is where I kind of some people tell you it's a positive, some people tell you it's a benefit. You got your 30-mile radius rule with the IHSA where you can kind of go find players and things like that. But also try and go find those players. On the other, it's not it's not as easy as everybody kind of makes it sound. I sat in a gym yesterday for probably about 6 hours, from about 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And, if I come out of it with maybe if I find one player in that mix, that's 6 hours of work that I kind of put in. So, and then obviously, can you find the player? But now can they afford, Providence is like $15,000. So, I mean, yes, I mean, there's financial aid and stuff like that, but still, I mean, okay, let's say you get it down to maybe 11 or 12, and I mean that's a car payment a month for some families. And even and depending on the area you're in too, I said okay, maybe a place like New Lenox, maybe a little more. They have, but then if you ask them to pay $15,000 a year, they got to give up a family vacation, they got to give something else up that that they're used to in their lives. So the whole kind of marketing, admissions, kind of finding players thing. I said it's a double-edged sword. I think that's kind of you run into that, and it's like I said, it's not as easy I think as everybody thinks it is. So that's kind of I think one of the it's a good thing. Like I say, it could be a blessing. Yeah, okay, you can get some players got a little further boundaries, but it's not as easy as kind of as it seems. I think another thing, and again, kind of depending on where you're at a little bit, but a lot of Catholics, I take St. Pat's, I take Providence. Facilities can be a challenge at private schools. I said we got at Providence, we have 2 gyms, and we have a boys program, girls program, each 3 levels each. You have dance and cheer that need practice time. So there's 8, you need 8 practice slots in a day when we only have 6. So, and the last 2 practice slots of the night are 7 to 9. So I think a lot of the public schools, you got your field houses, you got, your gym space, and maybe the latest you're practicing is 5 o'clock and you're done at 7. But we're stuck, a lot of times 7 to 9 at night, and then it comes into who practices 7 to 9 at night. Again, one of the things I kind of learned from Coach back in the day at St. Pat's, we only had one gym. It was the varsity went 7 to 9 at night because you got kids. In our case, you got kids coming from all different parts of the area, and travel and stuff. Like, you can't ask a freshman, really. It's tough to ask freshman parents to pick them up at 2:30 and then come back at 7 and then come back at 9. It was the varsity kids who were a little more access to transportation. So it's always kind of the varsity kids practice. But is that fair to the varsity kids? And then you got a game the next day. So I think that's kind of one of the challenges you kind of face as a private, the facilities can kind of limit you. Another challenge to working in a Catholic school, I think, is a little different than your public schools, is booster clubs. I mean, Catholic schools really I don't have a booster club at Providence. We don't have it. It didn't have one in St. Pat's. They didn't have one so now you're kind of stuck. St. Pat's didn't let you fundraise because, again, that becomes a sticky topic because, you ask them to do, the school asks you to do so many fundraisers, to help offset the tuition imbalance and stuff like that. Now, all of a sudden, you're asking as a basketball program to help fundraise. You're really hitting those parents up. We're having a hard time enough paying. So, depending on where you're at, a lot of times you may have to fundraise on your own, to kind of get that shooting gun, Dr. Dish, a huddle subscription. A lot of times that, booster clubs would kind of, I think, help take care of you in the public schools. So I think that's kind of some of just the major kind of, things that kind of jump out to me.
So let's go into your time as an administrator and maybe some things that connect to coaching. So I want to take this question a little bit of a two-sided question. What were some things maybe that you learned in coaching that you took to be an assistant principal? And now on the flip side, what are maybe some things you learned as an assistant principal that you're like, you know what, I'm taking that back to being a coach? Maybe both.
Well, I think one of the biggest things, again, I go back, I said, my philosophy at coaching is coaching's relationships. And I think, being able, with the assistant principal I worked at for St. Pat's for that year, was my relationship was with the faculty. It was I was kind of a little times an intermediator, maybe between the whatever's going on, the principal, the president, and the faculty or whatnot, and things like that. So I had to kind of develop a good working relationship with the faculty. I had to get them to trust me. Now, again, one of the benefits was a lot of them had known me from being there before, so they kind of knew of me and what I was about and who I was as a person. And, so I think I kind of had developed some trust. And again, as a coach, you got to get the players to trust you before they run through those walls and things like that. So, so I had the trust of the staff and the faculty to be able to kind of develop a good working relationship where I could kind of become a problem solver then in some cases. There's an issue come up here and you can't imagine, like I said, so you actually sit there much like as a head coach, as an assistant coach with a head coach, but become an administrator and the things that come up throughout the day, issues that come up with teachers and things like that. And so to be able to have, that kind of trust and that develop that relationship with them, I was kind of, I said, I think I had a good working relationship with the teachers that year on my side, and just being able to kind of then, have that relationship where they come in, and I can help them solve their problems. And it kind of created a collaborative effort, which I think is what you're going for, what I'm going for as a coach. Again, I'm trying to kind of make it, it's a kind of, I guess it's probably a relatively new term in code, kind of the player-led team and those types of things. And, gone are the days of, coach ruling with the iron fist and those types of things. You wanted the players kind of, I wanted the faculty to kind of take ownership, again, because they're the majority of the staff. They're the ones that are out there. They're beating the bushes. They're in the trenches with the kids. So I really wanted them to kind of feel involved and appreciated and those types of things and listened to and their voices heard. I think that's one of the good things I am, is a good listener. So I was able to kind of, there was a line of people in, coming in and out of my office kind of all day because I could listen to them. They trusted me and we had that relationship. And I think they felt like their concerns were heard, their issues were heard, and they felt like, we're in this together, which I think is what you're looking for, as a coach and player relationship, I think too. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, definitely. So I want to get into your psychology background in the classroom there and using it in coaching. Having that background, what are the things you do to help your team grow mentally, socially, emotionally? because that's also a big part of coaching, right? We all see the X's and O's and this and that, but a lot of it is the interactions with your teammates, your teachers, your other coaches, you know, young men growing up, maturing. Everybody's at different levels. So how do you kind of combine your psychology kind of experience and what you've learned and seen and put it to help your team grow?
Right. I mean, last year was really the first that I've actually taught, the psychology class, which was kind of neat. But and as a coach, you're kind of hit the nail on the head. As a coach, you're always kind of being a plain psychologist, I think. But I think there's a lot of different things, especially again, I know COVID kind of, put things a lot of back, hurt things and put things back in a way. But also, I think coming out of COVID, I think we learned some stuff too, which kind of is good for us, in terms of, like you said, the social emotional development, all that kind of stuff that's going with it. So I think there's a lot of different things psychological wise that we could do to help, our players grow and become better people and just become more healthier, mentally in terms of things like that. One thing, we started institute toward, my last year or so, and then we'll get it, it's and meditation. I mean, I think that's a huge thing that people kind of, again, it goes back to the debate, and we had this when I was a sophomore coach, saying, if we get the chance to spend more time on the court or off the court doing something else, we were always going to err on the side of spending more time on the court. I think that was kind of the mindset back then, just drill more, do more, play more, do more. I think I've kind of taken the thought now is I might cut back a little bit of what's going on the court, do more off the court stuff. One of those things being, like I said, just kind of, team meditation segments. So just kind of just take those times to quiet your mind, breathe, and the proofs in the pudding in terms of the research, how much that helps. Again, it's one of those things psychologically, that which gets praised gets repeated. I mean, you go back to the old ways of coaching and, kind of you're more barking out, criticize, screaming the criticisms. And now it's got to be more kind of, if you want something done, praise it, shout the praise, those kind of things, and criticize and quiet, I think is another kind of big thing kind of in terms of psychology and things like that. Thing I learned this year kind of teaching psychology, we talked a lot about the people's defense mechanisms and stuff like that. And, I've kind of become a little more, I think, understanding of why maybe a kid might react a certain way in a certain situation. I've kind of become a little more empathetic, to those types of things as a coach. Kids maybe having an off day shooting. And again, we don't want them to kind of, have those emotions and things like that. But, all of a sudden they're having a bad game. And all of a sudden now you're kind of calling them up and they kind of become defensive about it. Back in the day, I would get all upset and angry with them for kind of, challenging me a little bit or whatnot. But now, at least knowing the psychological workings of it now, you understand maybe those defense mechanism and those types of things. As a teacher, again, going back to the whole kind of, if you tell it to them, they'll kind of somewhat remember it. You show them, they'll kind of remember a little bit more. But now getting them to do it, kind of, I think, being more active kind of on the court as opposed to, them, the long lectures as some coaches would used to give, about, here's how we're going to do this, here's how we're going to do that. Get them more doing things, and as it kind of stand there, getting them more active. Again, dealing with millennials, I've done a lot of kind of some reading on that stuff and things like that. And millennials are kind of their mindset and things like that. They don't retain it. They don't have the attention span. A lot of times things, I should say, whatever the generation we're dealing with, what is it, Gen Z or whatever, the attention span. So gone are the days of, 4-page scouting reports. You can't kind of sit there and kind of take them through every little thing. I'm going to condense it now. We're down to condensing it to a page maybe. Just to kind of teach them in bullet points, those types of things. Hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it's just going to be quick and concise because that's all they can handle. That's all they can remember, those types of things. Same with film sessions. I mean, half hour, 45 minutes film sessions. I think kind of those days are gone. It's just kind of the way we're dealing with the generation and those types of things. I think your film sessions got to be quick and concise. And, you really got to emphasize the things you got to emphasize and get it to them early. And, I think, again, it comes to going back to a little bit, about, that which gets praised gets repeated, show more of the clips of the things of catching them doing it right, as opposed to maybe, you want to show them their mistakes, but you don't want to dwell on those mistakes in film sessions and things like that. But show them more of maybe kind of, I think, again, a psychological thing. I got this from actually another coach, maybe show more of the ball going in the basket and the ball not going in the basket. It's more of a psychological kind of thing. If they see, okay, here's us executing the ball going in the basket, it's going to be something that kind of triggers them that they're going to kind of want to do. So there's a lot of kind of different kind of tidbits and things like I said, but and I think it's all really comes coaching is psychology. Like I said, so we're kind of been using it, but I've kind of stealing some of it that I've kind of picked up in the last few years, kind of teaching it.
So you just mentioned your kind of preparation and scouting reports. Those are halftime adjustment segments. We're going to go a little bit more X's and O's, but more just general. Okay. You're preparing. Obviously, you play in one of the best conferences, right? You're every single day you got a dude and multiple dudes and teams that are really, really good. So and really good coaches that do a lot of different things.
Different styles. Yep.
So when you're going into the season and you start going, how are you adding those aspects and preparing? Yes, you got non-conference and things like that, right? But those teams in the conference. So how are you kind of adding that preparation to your practices for your teams in conference and those big time games to help your players prepare, whether it be getting used to looking at the scouting report or how to watch video so they can pull those things out when you get to those big games and big situations.
I think a lot of that has to do with kind of just being consistent with what you're doing. I'm a big believer in kind of keeping it simple is another kind of thing. The overload is kind of, as you overload and kind of things like that. So I think simplicity is kind of is where the beauty is. So we want to keep it kind of simple. We're a big believer. I think we've had a lot of success on, I think if you followed our teams, we played our best basketball a lot of times in March. We might struggle early and whatnot. I mean, we came back the one year, won the conference tournament, took third the next year. We kind of really put an emphasis on the process. We kind of, individual games that are kind of, but it's all we want to play our best basketball in March. I think is the big message that we're telling guys. And I don't want to say I would maybe give up a game, but if it's good, if something's going to help me win in March, that maybe I kind of maybe we give. It might hurt us in November. I think we're okay with that for the most part because I said I think the key is the end result. It's that process. I think a lot of that, like you said, kind of is our schedule. We schedule tough, and we always schedule tough. We scheduled. We didn't look to necessarily schedule wins and stuff like that in our non-cons. We played at the Tosh, and we played in some really good tournaments and so I think your schedule kind of helps prepare you for that end result too. They said we could say, boy, we play this team, this team, this team, and then all of a sudden now you get to and you're playing somebody in a regional semis, and it's like we played 10 teams during the season, a lot that were a lot athletic, maybe a lot better, things like that. So I think that's kind of a big thing. It helps our kids kind of understand, it's all kind of geared towards what we're doing in March. Like kind of gives them the confidence. But then again, I think I go back as you start your season. I think you said you do got to kind of teach them to kind of here's what we're looking for in film breakdown. Here's what you're looking for in a scouting report. You want to kind of keep. So we do kind of teach them and walk them through those things early in the season. Hey, here's okay. On this possession, we want you to really kind of focus in on the defensive rotations. That's kind of this is we're watching. St. Ignatius's, offense. And hey, here's how we're going to rotate, kind of key in as we're watching them. And maybe don't key in so much on your guy for these three clips. Just key on how we want to rotate defensively. And then now, okay, clips 4, 5, and 6. Okay, kind of concentrate on your matchup is kind of something we'll kind of, and then kind of as the season goes along, we kind of allow the players to kind of lead those film sessions. Then, we get them to the point where, like I said, again, show them how to do it. Then let them hit, but then also now they need to do it. So we'll kind of, we'll get to a point where, okay, it's players A, B, and C. You got this. Now, again, the coaches are doing the work too, but you guys got this week's kind of, you got to come up with 10 defensive, 10 offensive clips to get us ready for St. Ignatius. You got to, okay, then the next game, okay, it's players, you guys' job is to kind of pick these clips down. We'll kind of tell them earlier, maybe a couple days ahead of time. Okay, here's your potential matchups. Here's the two guys you could guard. And, we'll have them come back and report it to the team. This guy's strengths, this guy's weaknesses. So it's kind of, we kind of put, like I said, I'm a big believer. I said, I've come a long way in that, back to, I know we started out talking about, when I was a sophomore coach, it was kind of, it was all my show, and that's kind of how naive and dumb you were at that age. Now it's their show. So, I mean, we've kind of put into a lot of the players take the lead on a lot of that stuff. But again, I think you got to teach them how to do it first.
So I'm going to follow up here. You talked about process, right? And playing your best in March. Jon and I coached at Vider for a long time. Jon coaches at Res. We've said this all the time that our conference and our people we play help us come playoff time. But, process is all good and well, and you can say it, but you got to show your players. So how do you show your players, hey, that this process is working, right? You could have, maybe you have a tough stretch, you lose 2 games real close, or maybe you're not playing as well. Is it using stats? Is it using certain things you pick out on film? Maybe you executed this set better, whatever it may be. How do you kind of instill that belief in the process? Because eventually they got to see it, right, and know what
Sure.
the process looks like.
Right. I think, well, first it starts with you as the coach too. I mean, if you tell them that, it's about playing our best basketball in March, they got to see your actions line up with your. So if you're all of a sudden tell them it's all about March, it's all about March, and then all of a sudden you're getting hung up on one loss in November for the next week, you're going to send them mixed signals. So I think, as a coach, as a leader, I think the first thing is you got to back up your words with your actions. So I think that's kind of number one, is kind of you kind of having the actions to back up. It's about, and we want to play our best basketball. I think I mentioned it, kind of hit on a little bit earlier. Like I said, okay, maybe, we feel like, we're struggling maybe to score a little bit. Hey, here's, our last 5 games of, here's us executing right, and here's the ball going in the basket. Or even in this case, we're executing right, and we just missed the dang layup. I mean, I think that's kind of kind of getting that film and kind of be able to kind of point them to, hey, here's us doing things right, and here's us getting a great look at the basket. Here's us doing things right. Here's the ball going in the basket. I mean, again, kids are a lot of today. They're visual learners. Again, and they're kind of living on, dying on they don't come. But if you get a chance to kind of get that, like I said, film is one of the greatest tools. I mean, that's kind of one of the things one of the huge benefits coaching now. I said, huddle's so simple. I can kind of, hey, Friday night we play, Saturday morning going to school, I can clip, 10 clips of us having great possessions, on the defensive end, on the offensive end. I can shoot it out in a text to the guys. Hey, fellas, keep your heads up. Hey, here's where we're at. We're getting there. We're getting close. Those types of things. I think, and a lot of times it's letting them kind of get in, let them, I give them, I'm coaching with a couple of guys that, have been coaching for a long time. One of the guys used to be the head coach at Providence. He's told me multiple times this summer, he was with me, how he's, impressed, that we let the kids do the talking at the end of games. And a lot of times we do kind of let the kids lead the discussion that, we call them after action reviews. And I'll just look at the guys and say, hey, fellas, what are we doing well? And, they'll come up with 3-4 things, here's what we did well in today's game. I said, okay, what do we got to do better? And they'll come up with 3 or 4 things we got to do better. And, then you kind of, well, can we do these things better? Can we get there? And to the man, they'll kind of, yeah, coach, we got to do this. We got to do that. But again, I think it's kind of, like I said, showing them it through film. I said, kind of involving them in the process themselves. I think again, you can't just kind of keep top of it. You got to involve them in the process, and, kind of maybe some of the game plan and decision making, things along those lines, would be the best way. You kind of, I think you help them kind of, and then I said, eventually you're going to have to kind of, I said, we establish ourselves and you win some games in March and things like that. I think the kids then believe in the track record then too.
So as we get into the second half of the episode, we with every episode we're trying to focus on a theme, and for you we wanted to really focus on returning to your program and kind of some self-reflection as a coach. You've kind of hit on it already a little bit, but we're going to dig a little deeper. So just first, the first question in the second half is just, how did you kind of know it was time to return as the head coach at Providence, and kind of what were some things that went into your decision that you're like, you know what, this is where I belong. This is where I want to be the head coach.
That would be kind of, if I got any advice to give, if there's any young coaches out there listening, it's kind of make the big time where you're at. There's a book I read probably about 12 years ago by a coach by the name of Frosty Weathering, I think it was his name. And at the time, it really didn't sink into me. But, as I've kind of learned and grown and been at different stops and things like that, I come back and I just read the book probably about, a year and a half, 2 years ago again. Make the big, don't always be looking for that next big thing. And, everyone's got a place for them that's kind of special and specific. And I've been lucky, to be honest with you. I've had a couple places where it's been, but, I think, ultimately, Providence is kind of the big time for me. It's a good school. It's got great people there. It's just, as you tell your kids, I think too, it's more than about wins and losses and things like that. It's about, the relation. Again, I keep hitting home. I think that's another kind of, it's about the relationship. So I got great relationships with those people there. I was able to sustain them even when I left like 5 years ago, and we've kept those up. And, so those relationships is just kind of, that's, if you're able to kind of, like I said, maintain those relationships after you leave a place like that and things, to me, it tells you the place is pretty special. And I said, I mean, I would still see all those people after I left on a regular basis. And it's, so as I'm going to St. Pat's, the one, and I said, again, it kind of all ties together a little bit, probably about 6 years ago, I built a townhouse out in Lockport, 5 minutes from the school, and then, so now 2 years ago, I'm driving to St. Pat's for an hour, and I'm, one of these days, I'm finally just saying, what am I doing? Now 294 is a mess. I mean, it's just kind of an absolute nightmare. Some days it take me an hour and a half to kind of, get home and things like that. So, we're coming to the close at the end of the year at St. Pat's 2 years ago. And, I'm kind of a little bit of a crossroads myself in my mind, and the phone rings and I get a call from the president of Providence. He says, hey, we can basically give your old job back without being the head basketball coach. Would you have any interest? And, 5 minutes from my house, those relationships, it's kind of an easy thing to, again, it's something I don't regret necessarily leaving, but gosh, you don't get many chances to kind of get do-overs and things like that. It was kind of, to me, it was again, Catholic school, my Catholic faith. It was kind of a message from God to me, kind of this is where you belong.
All right, in the same vein, then, maybe something you used in the first time, right? Go around that you applied the second time, and then something that you used the first time that you didn't use the second time. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
kind of what you learned worked, and then something you changed that, hey, that didn't work.
Yep. I think, again, kind of, we just hit on a few minutes. I think the big thing, and I think some programs are different, things like that, but we end up with one of the things that probably do get quite a few multi-sport players there. I had a kid that's playing in the NFL right now, played for me on our 2015 team. So we got to share athletes. So again, I would go back to, so there might be times when we don't get some of our guys until after Thanksgiving because we're playing in the football state championship. Well, again, I think that goes back to the process. I think we're really good. It's all going to be about the process. We're not going to get hung up on, early season stuff and things like this. We're planning our season with the end goal of winning a regional, getting to the sectional championship, maybe getting a little luck and getting down, to the super and getting downstate. I think you have to kind of keep that, at smaller schools where you share some athletes and things like that. I think you have to kind of keep that in mind as, you might not have your guys early in the year and things like that. So they said, we're really going to focus on, let's play our best basketball. I think then it's worked well. It was a key to our success for the first 8 years we were there. I think it's going to be key to success for the next 15, 20 years that we'll be there. So I think that's a huge thing. X's and O's in terms of, what I've learned here now is, again, I've had a great experience now, kind of, going back, working with Coach Bailey again, seeing some things differently, being assistant last year, probably again, we got to keep it simple. I'm a big, but we're going to have to. I'm a believer now. You got to kind of be multiple in what you're doing offensively and defensively. Yeah, I don't think I used to be a straight man-to-man guy. Working with Coach for the year, he was all 1-3-1. Last year we were all 3-1 in Providence. I think you got to have a blend of those two. You got to be able to play man and zone. I think there's got to be times even it's just kind of come out of a timeout, the team's in a little bit of a rhythm. Hey, we're going to switch to our 1-3-1 tonight, or boy, this defense might suit us better tonight. 1-3-1 than our man. So and the same thing with our offense. Again, it got a great taste the last couple of years of running kind of some like pace and space dribble drive type of stuff. But when I was coming up, and what I'm used to is a good old fashioned motion offense. So I think you got to have your primary offense, but then you also, okay, this ain't working tonight. This isn't working tonight, or boy, I don't think this is going to work against the Paul switching man. So now we're going to try kind of have a little bit of secondary variation to that. And then I think the other thing is you just kind of going in, maybe not if X's and O's wise, is second time around, I think I'm going to try and involve the parents a heck of a lot more. I kind of tried my first time through is kind of keep the parents at an arm's distance. Now, to me, you forget it, but again, go back to Catholic schools. Some of these families are paying $15,000 for their kid to go to this school. They want an experience too. The parents, yes, it's their son's experience on the court, but they want to kind of have a good experience with this too, and I want to do everything I can to help them have a good experience in our basketball program, in our athletic program at our school. Um, so those would be a couple things that jump. I could go. There's a long list of things I learned not to do again and do again, but those are a couple things that jump out at me right away.
Coach, I wanted to follow real quick because I think that's that last thing the parents talked about is really really important. Because I think that's something like that's not like in the coaching manual, right? You have the X's and O's, you
Correct.
have how to do scouting reports, whatever it may be, and then a lot of those things aren't in the manual, right? So you got to kind of learn all along the way. So maybe just for it could be junior high coaches, high school coaches, whatever it may be. How do you kind of involve the parents, and what are the things you do to help them feel part of your community?
Right. I think one of the things that we started doing kind of my last, and then and I got this all again. This is nothing. By no means is this any of my stuff. This is all coaching stealing. You steal some of the stuff, best stuff from others. So I'm not kind of telling you. But parents practice in the preseason. I know we got a lot to do heading into those Thanksgiving tournaments, but you get the parents out to your practice, and you even involve them. And if they want to jump in, again, you kind of tailor your practice to, okay, we're gonna have some parents out there. They want to jump in and do some drills with their son. I mean, we kind of make it kind of a fun night. They jump in, do some drills, kind of they watch practice. We come back afterwards. We kind of have a little social in our at commons area. Another thing we've done in the past, it's been a huge hit. And I've asked, and other people asked me again, and this is not mine. I stole it from another coach. Around not Thanksgiving, February, we do a mother-son dinner. We get together, we go to a spot in the area. We get together, sons and moms sit together. It's kind of a formal thing. The kids get dressed up, the moms get dressed up a little bit. Have dinner together, which they said they don't see their kids a lot during the season. So how nice is it just to get to see them? And then we kind of the kid at the end of the night has to stand up and read a poem to their mom that ends with the words, "I love you, mom." And you can see there's tears from, running down his mom's eyes when that stuff happens. And, so it enhances their experience that way. Try and get the parents involved, kind of put them together, kind of running a fundraiser, running pasta dinners. Just the more I think you can involve them. Like I said, it's every bit, again, it's the kids' experience. I get it, but the parents are getting an experience out of this too. They form relationships and bonds and things like that. So those are just a couple of the quick things that we do to kind of help get parents involved. And, I think the more you can do that, again, I was one of those guys, my first time through, keep them at arm's length. They're kind of my enemies, all this stuff. You can either make them your enemies or you can make them your kind of co-partners in a lot of this. And I think it's going to be a lot better for people and a lot less headaches.
Well, speaking of stealing, I literally was writing all of that down as you were talking, and I will be stealing multiple things you just said. So thank you for sharing that.
That goes in the handbook and the portfolio, right?
Yes, it does. I just wrote 3 things down. All right. So one topic we really have not ever hit on this with a guest, and I really wanted to hit on this. As a head coach, what do you do to kind of self-reflect in the off season? I know I do it a ton, but how do you know things you need to personally change? As a head coach, we're grading our assistants, we're grading our players, but sometimes there's not always somebody grading us. So kind of for our listeners, how do you kind of self-reflect and decide like, hey, this season I didn't like when I did this, or this next season I really want to change this that I did?
Well, I think kind of, I don't know if it's self-reflect, but I mean, I'm a big believer in feedback. Again, this is something I would have never done 10 years ago, 12 years ago when I was kind of, sophomore coaches. But again, I've been working with a lot of different guys kind of at different things, and they've kind of, about once a month, I will ask my players, how does it feel to be coached by me? Again, I think that's such a powerful question. If you could, again, you got to have that relationship though with your players. You got to have that trust developed. Because a lot of times early on when I kind of try to, they'll spit you back the kind of the standard, oh, coach, everything's great, everything's fine. And they kind of tell you what you want to hear. But, I think if you ask them, you got a good relationship with that kid, that player, how does it really feel to be coached by me? And they can give you a good, honest answer. And again, if you got their relationship, I've got some powerful answers. I've been kind of, about how's my coaching feel on them. And it's kind of helped me kind of change the way and think about the way I kind of, again, you'll get some kids who, and again, that's what I don't think people understand. You can't coach every kid the same way. certain kids need to be kicked in the rear to be motivated. I've had certain kids say, hey, coach, you got to get on me more. But then there's other kids who say, hey, coach, you need to back off a little bit. So a lot of times as kids need some kids need a kick in the rear end, kids need, that arm around them. So I think that's been a great question for me to use to ask them, and then you can kind of chew on that yourself, and kind of that leads to a lot of self-reflection, their answers. Again, a lot of, again, it's common theme. I think it's kind of a common kind of practice now these days, but as you kind of do your exit interviews with kids and things like that, what is something in this program that you really want us to keep doing, that you really like? What's something that we have to stop doing, that you don't like, that's kind of, you think is hurting the program, is hurting our players? And maybe what's something new that we need as a program to start doing? I think those three questions are great. Stop, start, and introduce are great questions. And same thing as you ask your assistants those same questions, kind of, hey, what are some things, how do you see it? So I'm constantly asking them for feedback. I'll ask my AD to kind of stop in and practice and tell me what he sees and give me some feedback. We've got some great mentors in the area at Providence, and I got right at the school, Frank Palmasani, who won a state championship, coaching Walter Downing. He'll stop by practice. Hey, coach, what'd you see? Pat Sullivan, coach, the great coach at the University of St. Francis, is still out this way, and he'll stop by practice every now and then. Hey, Coach Sullivan, any thoughts, anything like that? And then in July becomes then a great time as you kind of keep a little notebook of things. I'm always taking notes when I'm talking to kids in our interviews and things like that. And you can kind of chew on it over the month of July. Like I said, we finished up July or June 29th, I think, was our last kind of official contact day. So I've had about 5 weeks here to kind of, go through my notebook and, again, kind of the psychology piece a lot. I try and spend a lot, about half hour a day and just quiet, in this month of July. And I got a lot of time to do that now. So I get sit in quiet, the solitude, gloss over those thoughts about, hey, this kid said maybe we should try this. This coach was thinking that. And you kind of review it. And then the other things you get back, once I do all that, I get back to my mentors, guys that really know our program, and say, hey, I'm thinking about trying this. What would be kind of the drawbacks of doing this? And like I said, I got some great people to bounce ideas off of, and they'll be honest with me too, and say, hey, Tim, boy, I don't know if this is really the best thing for your program and your situation, or they'll tell me, hey, it's a great idea. But I think having that group of mentors is huge, that you can kind of pick up the phone now after spending July thinking about, maybe we'll try this, maybe we'll try that, and just asking them what their thoughts are is kind of they said, again, it goes back to how we start. Again, all this stuff comes full circle, just the coaching fraternity, having those relationships, be able to kind of bounce those ideas off of.
So perfect lead in to next question. You've talked about your mentors a lot, people you've worked for. So how do you go about the process of filtering that information, right? Because you can get so much information from anywhere. Anywhere you look, there's stuff flying at you. So the first part of this question is like, what do you go through to know what to take? And then say, hey, yeah, thanks for the suggestion, but that's not right for me or right for our program or whatever it may be. Just the filtering process of all the information you get.
Right. I think your last guest talked a little bit about this on your last the coach from Sterling. I do a lot like he does. June, to me, that's a trial and error. Hey, boy, I'm thinking about maybe trying this, maybe adding this to our maybe this wrinkle to our offense, or maybe we're going to add this wrinkle to our 31 defense. And I think June is kind of an experimentation month. You can kind of, you're trying to kind of, you want to win some basketball games in the month of June. You play a gazillion of them, but so we're kind of getting in there. But to me, I'd use that as kind of an experimentation month, kind of trying to get this. Then as you get June done, I think you can kind of sit there and hammer some of that out. We'll try and kind of, we got the huddle camera, up in our gym. So we'll try and kind of film our workouts in the summer, in terms of our practices in the gym, go back and look at, hey, boy, this really worked in this situation. Boy, maybe it didn't work. Again, I'm a big believer. I said, I don't want to throw too much at them. I'll kind of filter it down to maybe it's one or two things that maybe if we're going to change, because we're not going to overhaul everything. I think that's too much for kids. So if you got a list of 15 things, talking to people, boy, these are the top two areas, I'll have what are our areas of, we need to concern or kind of most pressing for this upcoming season. We see the schedules this and our teams this. Okay, these two things. And now kind of the month of June, I can kind of hammer home kind of, again, this is where our advantage is. the internet, books, all those types of things to tell, kind of I'll go through those things, those 2 things offensively, 2 things defensively in the month of July, and kind of, does it fit our personnel? Does it not fit our personnel? Our coaches, we get together sometimes. We like to kind of do kind of a coaches retreat, our staff, maybe get away for a weekend and kind of just talk. And then we just kind of, all right, here's the 2 things I've kind of looked at, and I'll tell them ahead of time, let's kind of break this down and see what you guys think. And we kind of have some great discussions at those, and, behind closed doors and things like that. And, again, assistants are what head coaches make it. They can be great resources for you, or you can, kind of just have them beat them. And I said, I like that Coach Bailey did. I like to use them. So I said, here's the things. And we have some great discussions about those things.
So as we get into our last 2 segments, the first one we call 30-second timeout. It's our guests' opportunity to talk about whatever they would like, themselves, their program, something they want their listeners to know more about. Turn the tables and ask Todd and I a question. So kind of the floor is yours.
Sure. Well, this is one thing I think for all of us as coaches, we need to kind of think of, and I know everyone's kind of, a hot topic in our sports, especially in Illinois, is a shot clock, those, some rules changes and things like that. But again, your guys' thoughts, ideas, things here, as we implement a shot clock, maybe we change some rules. I think one thing we're kind of forgetting here is a conversation we got to keep having, is, we have a shortage of officials going on here throughout the country. And I think, again, what are your guys' some thoughts or whatnot? What can we do better to kind of get some younger guys into officiating? Because again, I plan on doing this hopefully for about another 20 years. I hope we got enough officials for another 20 years. It is getting a little, and I don't know if you guys are seeing on your side of the ball, but they said that I'm seeing sophomore varsity officials having to come work a sophomore game. We're seeing sophomore officials staying and working a varsity game. And it's never used to be like that. So to me, that's a little worrisome right now where the state of our game's heading in terms of officiating. One of the things I did was, at Marist was my last year there. We implemented an officiating course, and I'd say kind of helped me out, and we were able to license some guys and stuff like that. So if anybody's out there listening, that you can implement that at your school just to get more young people involved in this. I said this is going to come hit us pretty soon. I got a feeling, so we got to be ready for that.
All right, let's go into our quick hitter segment. Just kind of rapid fire, random questions. Could be basketball, could not be basketball. Just having some fun to finish out the episode. All right, first one is, do you have any maybe superstitions, good luck charms, things that you feel bring you luck before a game?
Well, they only come out on big games, but I do have my lucky suspenders. If anyone's ever kind of seen a Pat's Notre Dame sophomore game or whatnot, things like that back in the day, or even now, I do have a pair of suspenders that only come out for the big. Your kids will know it's a big game if they see me wearing it.
Awesome.
We have definitely not heard that one before. Okay, so I put this one in on purpose, and obviously, let's not give too many of his secrets. But what's a good Mike Bailey story?
Well, we got a few. I think one of my favorites is it's probably like my second or third year at back teaching, full-time coaching on the staff. We're playing Notre Dame in the regional championship on a Friday night at St. Pat's. So this is Thursday night. Practice is done. Kind of coaches kind of go out a little bit, kind of debrief about the week, get ready for, okay, what we got for tomorrow. I think everybody just about leaves. It's me and Coach Bailey left sitting. I think we were at Galvin's and whatnot. And so Coach kind of looks to me, and again, this is something you got to learn as an assistant coach. You got to kind of learn what you're saying to the head coaches. What if, he turns to me and says, so is there any possible way Notre Dame beats us tomorrow? And me and my I guess my wisdom turns to coach, says, well, Coach, we're ready, because back in the day when the East Suburban, played head home and home, Coach, we've already beat them twice. It's awfully tough to beat a team 3 times in a year, especially your rival. So we kind of leave on that note. Next morning we come into school, and I think Coach has dark circles under his eyes, and he looks like Coach, what's the matter? Tim, I didn't sleep all night after what you told me. I mean, again, I probably should have, again, no, I would not have said it, but it was like one of those things, it came back, he's like, I kept him up all, and I don't think he slept much on game nights or begin with, but this was what he didn't sleep a wink. Think about it, because we're going to lose the regional championship to Notre Dame because we already beat them twice. If you got time for another quick one, there was another time.
Yeah.
Again, for some reason, it always kind of relates back to Galvin's for whatever reason. I don't know why, but again, we're sitting there. We're in the middle of this. I think it was towards the end of the season. One night, we're sitting at Galvin's. We're talking. And I think, coach, it kind of, he gives his assistants, things to look at, he's thinking about maybe doing for the next year, things like that. So he hands me, I think it was 3 Lincoln High School 1-2 ball press tapes to, kind of, hey, why don't you go watch these? Let me know what you think. We're thinking about maybe doing this, so we finished the night up at Galvin's. We go home. I get home the next morning. I wake up like, uh-oh, the tapes are gone. I think what I did was that when I got to the car, I put them on my top of my car to open the car door. And so I had to go back next morning. They weren't in the middle of Lawrence Avenue. They were about 2 weeks later. Coach comes to me and says, hey, Tim, what do you think about the 1-2-2? And as at that point, Coach, the tapes are gone. And needless to say, we never ran the 1-2-2 then at St. Pat's.
Yeah, good old tape days, right? The tape exchange.
Yep, yeah, VHS. Oh yeah, yep.
Your favorite off-season getaway activity?
Golf. It's one of those things I've kind of become. I'm not very good at it, but I've become an avid. It's one of those things. You really didn't. You kind of looked at people funny who did it in high school back when I was in high school, but now I wish I would have done it in high school. It's some. I try and spend a lot of July doing and whatnot, and it's just, that's me right now.
So for those of you that don't know, I know, Coach, you've coached baseball for a long time. And I also kind of, since we're in the summer, I wanted to throw in a couple of summer ones. So what's like you're going to a baseball game and your favorite food that you're getting at a baseball game?
Oh, I got to get one of those hot fudge sundaes in the helmets. Those
Okay.
are the, I got your collection of the helmets and things like that. But if I have to have one of those before I leave. Yep.
I still got some helmets laying around, I think, from like the Dairy Queen days when they used to give out the helmets, right? Like all the teams. And you were hoping you wouldn't get the same one, or I was always hoping I didn't get the Cardinals one because that wasn't worth anything, right? All right, your favorite barbecue food?
I'm a cheeseburger guy. I'm a plain Jane when it comes to that stuff. Give me a good old cheeseburger, probably a double cheeseburger with a little bit of bacon on it, and I'm a happy man.
Yeah. Sounds delicious. I might have to go cook that up this afternoon.
And then the last one, I thought I would throw in a one basketball one. What's maybe a skill you feel is under taught in the game?
Yeah. I think everyone would kind of agree on it, but I'll break it down a little further. I think passing is kind of a lost art a little bit, but specifically, especially now with the way the game's gone, I think feeding the post pass is kind of we got a kid now, we probably got about 6'6", 6'7", that we're gonna have to utilize in the post this year. And I could, we'll trade it this summer. We're trying to get it in there, and we'll make some just god awful passes. And the coach will look at it and we don't teach it. No one teaches it anymore. I mean, it's one of those things on our notes that we're going to have to go down and make sure kind of we get to early in the season, first, second day of practice, kind of go back, break it down that post feed, that post pass.
So, Coach Trendel, we really appreciate you being on. We look forward to the things you're going to do in the second time around at Providence, and we appreciate your time this morning. And I know this is an episode our listeners will really enjoy.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Todd. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the After the Timeout podcast in concert with the Illinois Basketball Coaches Association. Please remember to give us a 5-star rating wherever you may listen. For more show content and upcoming episodes, follow us on Twitter at After the Timeout and subscribe to our podcast for upcoming episodes. Thank you for listening.